All right, welcome everybody to the third episode of Cockpit Counsel. I'm Tim Parilla. I'm the Chief Legal Officer here at LinkSquares, also avid pilot, and excited to host a series where each week, I'm sure it'll evolve over time, but talk with GCs and other professionals that are really leading their field to talk about really anything that we want to talk about. So without further ado here, today I have Danielle Sheer. She's the General Counsel at Bottomline Technologies. When I think about a public company general counsel, think of that really exemplify what that means and do it well. And Danielle is by far at the tip top of that list. Danielle, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for that really generous introduction too.
It's deserved.
Thanks. I'm really happy to be here.
Great. Well, for everybody listening, please feel free to submit questions along the way. We'll keep an eye on that and try to take and field your questions as well. But Danielle, I think it'd be really helpful. Just give us a little bit of your background. Tell us about your current role and maybe some of your previous experience.
Sure. So I started at a law school at a firm in Manhattan, and I was just a corporate associate doing M&A and SEC work. I thought it was such a tremendous experience. I also thought New York City was the center of the universe, and I think it can be for a lot of people, but it certainly was not for me. I always had a love affair with Boston after the Sox had broken their curse. My brother was in BU, and I don't know why, but something propelled me to want to live in Boston. And I found a startup, had 50 employees at the time, named Carbonite. And come hell or high water, they wanted to take the company public, and they knew they were going to need to hire an attorney. The co-founders of the company, this had been their sixth company they had founded together, and they had never had an attorney on staff, and they were having a really tough time hiring somebody. For those of us that have been the first attorney in a company, you can all understand how hard that is for folks and how scary.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I was probably like employee 51 or 52 or something like that. And that was in 2009. In 2011, we went public, and it did come hell or high water. The day that we went public, there were like 15 companies lined up to go out. All the bankers' screens turned red. The market was crashing, and two companies got out. It was us and I think a Canadian company.
Okay.
And it was an unbelievable experience. And then we ran the company as a public company for the better part of a decade. And during that time, we did a CEO transition, a CFO transition. We defended against a hostile takeover, patent trolls galore, and activist shareholders. We turned into an M&A machine. And at the end of it, the company ended up selling to OpenText in late 2019. And now there's a smattering of Carbonite, we called ourselves Carbonistas, probably now all over the globe, former Carbonistas, and they were just some of the most talented people I've ever worked with. And I'm really proud of what so many people have gone on to do next. So that was an exceptional experience, startup to public company to sale. I moved over to Bottomline. It's B2B payments, very different world. Our customers are banks and large enterprises. I've been here for 2 years, and I think fintech is really exciting. I think it's changing every day. I think the consumer fintech industry is forcing change in the B2B industry, although it's slower to adopt in B2B. I think I've learned a lot about the GC role. I've learned a lot about me personally, and I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to be on a journey like this.
That's awesome. So I want to go back to something that you had mentioned. Some of the executive turnover. That's an incredibly interesting dynamic to have experienced at that stage of the career, and particularly looking at because right through the IPO, you're founder driven, right?
Yeah.
And then you have what I assume would be a couple of the founders moving out. Is that right?
Yeah, the whole founder team, in fact.
What was that like, being sort of that just from from every like sense of comfort and knowing who you're working with to like political workings and things like that that must have been at play. Like that must have made your head spin. I can't even imagine. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, it was really, it was very tough for the company. It was also very necessary and totally time. To a lot of people's credit, one, we found the right guy. Muhammad Ali, no relation to the boxer.
Okay.
But he was the former chief strategy officer of Hewlett Packard and just a brilliant, strategy leader. He came, so him and the board um, partnered on making sure that this transition was going to be a really well-received transition. The founder of our board, the CEO founder of our board was on the, the CEO and founder of the company was on the board, and he was staying on the board during the transition. They worked
Okay.
very closely together, which was fantastic. Both myself and the CFO were part of interviewing the CEOs, which I have to say makes a huge difference when you're bringing somebody in from the outside. If there are trusted people, executives in the organization who can say, listen, we've met him, we're excited about him. We introduced him to the organization in really thoughtful ways in connection with our CMO. But I'll tell you, even though we took, I think, all of the right steps to execute the founder transition, it was still very difficult because the company changed. New leaders bring new ways of managing. Mohammed had cut his teeth at IBM in Corp Dev. I think it's probably was one of the best corporate development teams that, in history. And he brought a lot of those people to Carbonite and turns Carbonite into an M&A machine. And he's amazing at it, but a very different culture than what Carbonite was before he got there. And, some people went on that journey with him and some people really wanted the startup life. To Mohammed's credit and the folks that he brought in, he has worked in both environments, so he completely got it. And everybody, was really well cared for if they decided to tap out and they wanted to be more part of a startup. And the people who wanted to stay with it, Mohammed was willing to teach people what he expected of them, me being one of them. I remember early on, I had a conversation with him and I was quite intimidated. I did not cut my teeth at IBM. And I didn't go through the IBM finishing school,
Right.
executive finishing school. And, but he just wants strong players on his team. I still think that's the leader he is, and somebody hungry to win. So ultimately, I think the team ended up really well-rounded, and it was a mix of people who knew the company when, and a mix of people who knew how to take it to the next level. And it was a truly just exceptional experience. But we thought about people every step of the way. We thought about how they would receive the news, how their jobs would change. We communicated with them through that, change period. And I think that's necessary to motivate your team members through any sort of change, but also through, I think, what all of us are living through right now, which is the market is just insane with options for talent.
Yeah, absolutely. That's interesting. I know you and I have spoken a lot about sort of being the first in-house attorney at a company, but that's a completely different dynamic of like, okay, now I'm at this company and I've gotten used to working with a management team, being a part of a management team, and now that management team is changing. What were some of the struggles that you dealt with at that time? Like I can just imagine, it's everything from communication style to expectations and the view of the role, right? The view of the GC role.
Such a great question. I talk to so many people about what can oftentimes feel like a revolving door of leaders at companies, and I think that's very much happening right now, with everybody's jobs. So I think about this in three ways. One is tactically, two sort of more strategically, and three personally. So tactically, I saw every position at Carbonite change over between like 2 and 15 times. I'm pretty sure I had like 15 heads of sales in 10 years. It's just insane. And so tactically, new leaders come with new relationships and new people and new contracts. And I can't tell you how many times somebody said to me, I wanted all of this stuff, I want to terminate it, I'm bringing in my own team, external, internal. And everybody has a right to do that, right? Because they understand what their strengths and weaknesses are, and you need to surround those leaders with the right team to make them successful. But that can be a real headache for a legal team, especially if that door just revolves every 2 years. So tactically, I wanted to make sure from a contracts perspective, we could get out of vendor contracts and other sort of external advisors so that we weren't saddling new leaders with old leaders' teams. I learned that, a couple years in, and I still think, that's probably the right thing to do. So that's tactically, just sort of how do I unwind one person's world and help a new person spin up their new world. Strategically, the general counsel is only as successful as their relationships are in the organization. We don't have a right to tell people to move faster or to not deliver that product or to not sign that contract. I mean, we certainly can say things like that, but I don't think that's what makes an influential general counsel. I think if you're doing the job right, people come to you and solicit your advice because you help them be stronger and you help them succeed and you help them win. In order to do that, you have to work on the relationship, and that relationship needs to be one of trust. And that's not something that you can build in a month. I think it takes a good year to start building the foundation of a relationship with trust with these key leaders. When there is turnover, you have to keep building those relationships, and you need to have, I think, a strategy for how you're going to be successful there. Because if you don't do it, you'll be left out of conversations, and you will not be a successful general counsel. All of a sudden, you won't know what's going on with the head of engineering or the head of products because you haven't worked on your relationship with them, so they're not soliciting your feedback, so you're kind of out of the loop. Well, I think it's a fundamental part of the job. It's just unfortunate, right? If there's turnover, you got to kind of step up to do it. My last part is personally, that's hard. That's like a drain. I mean, building relationships is, it takes a pound of flesh, but I think that's a majority part of the general counsel job is building relationships of trust.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one thing that I've really focused on throughout my career has been doing my best to try to be proactive in the way that I build and scale a legal function, and that's not just the legal work. It's exactly what you're talking about, which is probably the most critical thing, just getting out in front of those relationships and making it a point to, you don't have to be everybody's best friend. I'll be perfectly honest with you. I've worked with people that I can't stand and they can't stand me, but we knew that we were a really good team, and like we were happy in the results, and thankfully there are fewer people like that than people where we got along famously. But that's it. It's figuring out, okay, let's invest in this relationship, whatever this relationship may be. If there's some sort of personal connection that forms in connection with being a great business team, which there usually is, that just makes it a little bit happier and a little bit easier. But so much of this role is people, and as you say, relationships is just absolutely critical to be able to manage that. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I completely agree with you. I also think it's important. It's hard. I don't think that CEOs and CFOs sometimes always appreciate that the value that a general counsel can bring. We are the only people without a number on our back, or without a product to deliver, or without a marketing campaign that needs to show results. And lawyers are trained to be simplifiers. So I think the GC has such a unique vantage point where they can look across the spectrum and across the team and take in, what the goal is. If you're plugged in because you've built these relationships of trust, what the motions are and how the pieces are moving, and then sort of sit back and kind of, act as a great simplifier. And I think when the role is done really, really well, you're able to connect with the CEO and say, here are some things that I'm noticing, we might want to focus on this. Or the CFO, like, here are some things that are going down sort of more in the weeds in the sales organization, but I think they might end up showing up in the numbers. But no other person on the team, I think, has the best vantage point for that, because everybody else is sort of myopic. They have to be myopic. Even the CFO, which is myopically in the numbers.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And a well-functioning legal team has relationships, and maybe not specifically the general counsel, but your legal team should have relationships at literally every single point in the organization. And if your legal team is coordinating well and operating well, there's this moment where everybody's sitting down and saying, hey, tell me what's going on in acquisition marketing. Tell me what's going on in the people function today. Tell me what's going on in engineering. Hey, how's that patent harvesting program that we have going? Like, tell me what's happening. And then you're able to recognize where there may be some intersections that could either, delay some productivity, come as a surprise to certain parts of the organization. And you're able to proactively work across those functions to be able to say, hey, so-and-so over in product and engineering is doing this. By the way, I know that you're promoting this thing in this way, and that this is a major part of like the next however long campaign you have. You two should absolutely sync up.
Absolutely.
And not even a legal issue. It's just
exactly right. And I once heard a GC say it to me like this: legal teams are the central nervous system of a company. You may not feel everything immediately, but it will eventually feed through the central nervous system. All of that data that we're taking in, all that cross-functional data, all that activity, because we're not like down here, but we're sort of up here and we see all of it moving, that's an incredible source of information to help the team be stronger, to help the company achieve its goals. You know what I mean? And I think it's incumbent on the general counsel to figure out how to teach a company how to get the value out of a general counsel and a legal team in that way. I don't think people see it this way. I think the pendulum is swinging. I think they're seeing it more and more. But I said it to my current CEO in a way that he really understood, which is, let me look at it through my lens. When I go to hire outside counsel, and I've worked with a lot of different outside counsels before, and I have made a lot of mistakes in my choices in outside counsel teams, both for myself and for the outside counsel and for the company. So I've learned a lot. The best outside counsels I've worked for make me look like a hero.
Yep.
And what I love about that is the people in my company, the best relationships that I have are when I make them look like a hero. I don't need to be seen. I don't need to take credit for the wins that they take if I'm part of it, or even if I called the play. My job is to help them win and to help them be successful. Like the outside counsel's job is to help me win and be successful. And so, I sort of think it all pays itself forward. And anyway, he really got that analogy really well. I think it works.
That's huge, and that's plain and simple. That's just a core leadership characteristic right there. Like you like a major reason why you're successful. Sure, there's hard work, there's intellectual capability, et cetera. But it's exactly that mentality. The wins around me, our team wins, no matter what part I played in this, and I'm ultimately accountable for every decision that I make. And if you really live and die by that, and you eventually end up leading by that.
Exactly right. You eventually end up exactly the leader you want to be.
That's right. It's interesting to think about like how, I'm starting to see, and maybe it's just because of sort of the space that I'm in, and usually talking to founders, usually first-time founders, the way that CEOs and founders are looking at the GC role seems to be changing.
I think so.
And I think a lot of it comes from some outside maybe some negative experiences from outside attorneys, because maybe those outside attorneys, like the outside attorneys, if you're not thinking that way, where I want to make, you know, the GC look good. If there's no GC, it's I want to make the CEO look good.
Yeah.
If they're thinking like that, there's a very high probability that the CEO, who, you know, usually doesn't have as good of a perspective as the GC would as to the role of outside counsel, you know, it's very likely that you're going to see that sense of like, well, these people aren't really worth it. I need something different from a lawyer than what I get from these lawyers.
Well, and also, all lawyers aren't created equal. And what I mean by that is, you know, I think the view that most people have of lawyers is of transactional lawyers. They're brought in to run a litigation, they're brought in to buy a company or sell a company, they're brought in to take a company public. That's not a general counsel. That's not what a general counsel does at all. You know, we have a mutual friend, Andy Dale at Alice, and he very much thinks that the general counsel role is to be a consigliere, and I completely agree with him. You know, you have to have a lot of conversations with the CEO and the CFO and the rest of the team. People have to generally want to solicit your advice on a matter. You know, if you don't figure that out as a general counsel, then you're sitting and waiting for somebody to issue spot a legal issue to bring to you. Like, then you become the general counsel of contracts, which is, I have to sign a contract. Tim, can you help? And that's not what a general counsel does. Right.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, you know, I think about it in terms of the difference between an in-house attorney and your external attorneys. Yes, that consigliere sort of feel, but also there has to be a recognition that you're a business person with a legal background.
Exactly.
Right. If you're coming into a company because you want to be a company lawyer, then the general counsel role might not be the right one for you. You might want to be head of transactions or head of litigation within a legal function, where, like, yeah, go and be a lawyer. Like, and you can, and I know people who are in those roles and who have been in general counsel roles and are saying, there's no way I want to be a general counsel ever again. I absolutely want to go back and find my head of litigation. I want to manage cases. I want to do internal discovery. I want to have a great time with that. And they're really good at it and really successful. It's not for everybody, because a lot of times lawyers are uncomfortable actually making calls, right?
Yeah.
And that aspect of just like presenting, like, oh, well, here's the legal risk, you decide, is a really good way to get yourself replaced as a general counsel.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think, you know, so many of the folks that we talk to who are up and coming in the GC role, they want to know, you know, how do I get to sit down in that room with the CEO and she say to me, okay, I want to get this public company, this company public. I want to get this company public in 2 years. How do we do it? And she's not asking you a transactional question. She's telling you, this is my goal for this company, and, you know, help. That's the role of the general counsel. All right, let's talk it through. Are we ready? Do we have the right team? Do we have the right tools? Do we know, and then, like, what do we do next? Because that's not an ending. That's barely a beginning, you know? So
yeah, exactly. I mean, when it comes down to it, when like the business and financial aspects of any sort of public company transaction, or private, like, as soon as those things are laid out, the paperwork's not that complicated. Like, lawyering the thing is really not that challenging. It's everything else that.
So how do you become like that general counsel? Because I'm sure there's a bunch of people listening who are like, okay, well, this all sounds great, Danielle and Tim, but, like, you know, I'm a one-woman band, I'm a one-man band, you know, and I'm the one negotiating the contracts, and I'm the one, you know, issue spotting. And I was there. I think you were there, Tim, right?
I was there at DraftKings. I'm there at LinkSquares right now. I don't have any attorneys. Thankfully, I have one starting in a couple weeks, but yeah, I reviewed NDAs for the first time in like 8 years, back in March when I first started. Right.
Well, one, you just roll up your sleeves and do what has to get done. But if you don't have a plan, to build it, to scale it, you will be stuck there. Nobody's going to hand it to you. You've got to build it. I had a CFO I worked with, the last CFO at Bottomline, who just took a company public, by the way, very, very smart man. And when I started, he said, what's your chessboard look like? And he's exactly right. Who are your players going to be? What do you need to be successful? How do you shore up your weaknesses? And, you know, no other executive on the team is going to sit down with you and have that conversation. If you want to scale and you want to brand yourself as a certain type of general counsel, it's up to you. And so I spent a lot of time talking to other GCs about this when I was younger in my career. You know, I sort of went out and made friends with 3 or 4 general counsels, and I wanted to find out what their job was like and what their day was like and how they scaled in their role. And I started to see the progression and how long it would take. And it's not easy to ask for budget, and it's not easy to hire people. It's not easy to fire people when you've made mistakes. But that's all part of scaling in the role.
Absolutely, and that's a great question. I definitely had to, you know, I had to learn very much in a trial by fire. This is now my 3rd company where I've been the first in-house attorney, and you learn different things in each, you know, in each role and in each company. Every company is different. You know, I mean, my best advice would be, you know, to somebody who's maybe first time GC, or how do you become that business person? I think it goes back to what you said, you know, earlier on in the conversation. It really is relationships. I can't tell you, like, one of my biggest mentors who's done more for my career than anybody else has been an accountant, is a CFO. And it was, hey, Tim, I'm sure you have whatever hard skills you need to do a legal thing, but that's not going to make you successful. Like, in and of itself. If, like, you want to be successful because your legal skills are great, go to a firm.
Right. That's right. That's a great answer.
And so I said, well, listen, my undergrad was in finance. I said, well, I have a finance background, so I'm not, like, completely illiterate when it comes to the business environment. I worked in corporate gigs before going to law school, like during college, and like working full time, going to school at night and stuff like that. And so I had some semblance of, like, understanding of what it meant to operate in a corporate environment. But I really just leveraged that relationship and the relationship of some of the other professionals. You know, another guy who was the head of marketing at my first job really helped me to understand the importance of the business terms of a deal for contracts that I was reviewing. You know, it was really building those relationships and saying, how can I be better? And it wasn't how can I be a better lawyer, it's how can I use my legal skills to help you move your objectives forward in a more smooth way or in a faster way.
And not just legal skills, your analytical skills, your ability to, you know, like I said, take complicated sets of data and distill it down to its simplest parts and help make a decision. What, you know, one of the organic things that comes from the relationship building that you're talking about is, you know, you've got you know, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 executives around a table sitting with the CEO. CEO ultimately makes the decisions, but, you know, you're all talking and debating and challenging, and you're trying to come up with a strategy that's going to be a winning strategy for everybody.
Right.
And, you know, the GC is a player in that room. So the more relationships you build, I think the likelier that you're building a team that's strong. So I'll just give you an example. I was very close with my chief marketing officer at Carbonite, and you know, he had an idea that he wanted to execute on, but it was going to cost a lot of money and it was going to be a lot of risk. And so he bent my ear on it, and then he bent, you know, the sales leaders ear, and then the engineering leader. So by the time we get to the table, and the table where we debate it, and, you know, we make a recommendation, and, you know, you've got maybe 2 people who are like, look, I wouldn't do it, it's too much of a risk, and you've got 6 or 5 people who are just like, no, it's go hard, it's go hard, it's go hard, and the CEO sort of makes a decision. I mean, that's what it's all about, right? It's about, and that's where you want to be. Those are the conversations you want to be in. You don't want to be the person in the room saying, well, we're going to have to figure out how we, like, negotiate the contract for blah, 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 blah. Like, that's not what you're there for.
It's not helpful.
You will, Right, somebody on your team will do that, or if you're the only person there, you'll do it. But that's not why, the general counsel is the general counsel.
Exactly. So listen, Danielle, I know we're running up on time, and I know that you and I, because we have before, could talk about all of this stuff for hours, and this can talk about it in so many different ways. But we do have a couple of questions. Um, tips for tips for running a remote legal function. How has and it's your typical COVID question, right? Now moving to remote, what have you done? What's been successful? Has there been a silver bullet for you, or has it just been a relatively smooth transition?
Yeah, such a great question. So without sounding creepy, I touch people more.
Okay.
So I
Super creepy.
it's super creepy, right? Yeah. No, but I have one-on-ones with everybody on the legal team, whether they report directly to me or not, once a month. I wouldn't have done that otherwise. I have weekly team meetings, and the team meetings are partly transactional, but partly just personal. I want to get to know people. We do stupid icebreaker games, and get to know each other in that way. And then and it's not top down. Like everybody takes a turn and has to come up with something that we're going to do during that team meeting.
That's
I'm very transparent with the team about what's going on in the company. To a certain, not everything, because there's a lot of confidential information, but I try to make them understand often how they're part of the greater machinery. And I think that goes a long way. And then the last thing, the last two things that I think I started to do was we do a quarterly team event. Some of them haven't been able to be in person, but we're starting to do them in person. And everybody on the team gets a quarter and they get to choose it. So like whether we go to a Red Sox game or whether we're just doing like a barbecue at somebody's house, and we fly everybody in because I've got people who are all over the country now. And we get together. So that's something that we all look forward to. And then I am more thoughtful or more mindful about protecting the team. The legal team gets a bad rap in companies by and large until it gets changed. And we all know LinkSquares is changing that dialogue. But like it does have a bit of a bad rap, like it's stuck in legal. And hey, I need this contract and it's urgent and I need it in 24 hours, 2 days after the end of the last quarter. So I try to do things to protect the team and make sure they know that I value them. So for example, we instituted sort of this new policy. Nobody can take vacation the last 2 weeks of the quarter, like vacation. Like if something happens, you go, but vacation.
Sure.
But the first week after the quarter, I'm not gonna make you take vacation days either. You check in, if you wanna be off the grid, you gotta take vacation days, but check in, but like you can take a beat. Take a beat from how fast and hard we all ran to make it to the end of the quarter. And if anybody dares in my sales team try to come after those legal folks, I mean, they have to get through like a mama bear because
right.
our people deserve a chance to rest, and to recover. So I do things like that to make sure that we're all part of a team that understand, how hard they're working. I value it very much. I care about who they are as people. I have to say, I also find it way easier to performance manage remote than I do in person because FaceTime is just not relevant. I can't bank FaceTime and turn it into quarterly cash. So you either deliver or you don't, and that stands on its own. And if you're falling behind in some way, it's kind of a lot easier to see. And then I'm able to get out ahead of it and coach. And I truly believe that somebody who's falling off the beaten path either is in the wrong role, in which case, let's see if we can get them in the right role, or they just need some coaching. And I'd like to get there before it's too late. So I found that our remote life has worked really well. I'm closer to the team.
Yep.
I am looking forward to like actually seeing people again, though, to be perfectly fair.
Well, that's absolutely incredible. Like after hearing you talk about that, I'm just kind of like, all right, so like after whatever my career looks like here at LinkSquares, like, can I come work for you? Is that right?
You just want to see if we can get tickets to like Game 4 for the Red Sox. I cannot.
Hey, that would have been a better question. I probably could have helped you out with that. Am I? So last question here. Do you have a pre-flight ritual? Like, yeah, like you're going to wherever for business. Do you have a ritual?
I don't think I do, but now that I'm thinking about it, if I'm, most of my business trips are relationship building, right?
Right.
And so I love to travel and I look forward to it because I know it's now about like breaking bread with people. I make sure that like the itinerary has lots of opportunity to get to know each other. And I guess if there was a ritual, and this is like, oh my God, this is probably going to go down and like terrible, but like I have a glass of wine on the plane.
Yeah.
I'm excited. I'm relaxed. I can't wait to spend some time with people I don't usually get to spend time with and get to meet some new people. And like, I have a glass of wine.
I'll be honest with you. My pre-flight ritual, at least when someone else is driving the bus, is the same thing. Maybe not always a glass of wine, but I like to get to the airport a little bit early, have a drink, relax, and just kind of gather my thoughts before sitting down in the chair for a few hours. So it's
Let's take a business trip together.
I'm all in. I'm all in. You pick the location, we'll get it done. So
awesome. This is so great. Thank you.
This was awesome. Danielle, thanks so much for joining, and everybody who tuned in, thanks so much. We're really happy to have you. Hope you found this helpful, and we'll be back in a few weeks with the next iteration. Thanks again, Danielle.
Yeah.